David, I want to thank you for inviting me and my wife here tonight. I love New York. We used to live here, and I just feel it a gift to be on the same platform that Tim Keller was on. I am nowhere like him. I have a lot to learn from him, but this is a special night for Gene and I. You can tell how crazy we are. This is our 50th wedding anniversary tonight. And when you get through hearing me, you'll know the miracle of that. Partway through our marriage, she decided to become a priest to get closer to God so she could live with me, and then went back and got her doctorate as a physical therapist. So I sleep with a priest and a therapist, and get to go to confession twice a day, which people feel I have to do. But it is all about grace that we're here tonight, and I wonder why we accepted this, but after hearing Tim and being part of your community, it's a great gift, and I thank you for the opportunity to do this. And I do want to be very honest about what I'm not. I'm not a theologian, I'm not a professor, I'm not an educator, I eventually finished 3 freshman years of college, which is why I'm in education. God has a great sense of humor. And as my granddaughter says, you know, you're the only person I've met that has written 4 books and read 4 books in your lifetime. But that God has me involved in education really does. And that I'm standing up after Tim Keller. It's all a great journey, and it's all grace. And I'm thankful that I can share a few things. And I was asked to just share a little bit of the story. And in the time, I'm going to have to move quick, because when I think of calling, my first calling came when I was 17, because I'd given up on life by the time I was 17 and was so angry because I couldn't make it in school, but I didn't know, they didn't use words like learning differently. You were just considered dumb, and I wasn't able to hang out with the people I wanted to. I got in trouble because I hung out with the wrong people because they accepted me. And when you feel you're dumb, you live with that your whole life. You always feel like, hey, they're going to find me out. And because I didn't understand what those books were saying, I didn't feel like I had any hope. And by the time I was 17, I thumbed all over the country. I kept looking for life, and then somebody from this group, Young Life, came into my neighborhood and got me back in school and helped me at least try to make it that way, and gave me an introduction to Jesus Christ, which was I didn't believe in. I didn't believe there could be a God that would put me in the world I was in. I didn't see anything about love or trust. The only people you could trust were those who you could see and keep in your face. But that was just the beginning. I'm still working at it. At 75, I'm still trying to be on that path. But that was the turning point. And fortunately, another friend got helped out at that time. But unfortunately, he was wanted in New Jersey when we met Christ. And our mentor said, you ought to go back to school, and Vinny ought to finish his time, and then you can get on with your youth movement. So I chomped at the bit and finished actually I had 2 freshman years at the University of Pittsburgh, but I had 1 here in New York, at New York University, so I've been studying in different states. So when Vinny got out of prison in 1960, we moved into Harlem. And we started the Urban Young Life work there. And we're at a place uptown called the Church of the Master, the crossroads Africa had come out of. And I had one gift at that time, and that was hanging out. And I'm still looking for a university to give me a degree in it, because I've hung out. Not just on the streets, but I've had the privilege of being on a lot of kinds of streets. But that's where I got my degree, was in those 11 years from 1960 to 71 here in New York City. But hanging out was missing. Nobody was on the benches. Nobody was on the streets. Love goes where people are. I'm alive today because somebody walked through the valley of the shadow of adolescence and loved me into change. And I've been able to tell that story, whether it's on the streets or the White House or Wall Street. I said, love's the only transformational thing we have. I've spent 75 years trying to figure that out, and that's what it's all about. It's about grace, and it's about love. But love goes where people are. They go in their face, not in their Facebook, in their face. And I was able to cut it no matter what I looked like, because I sat on the benches, because somebody did that for me. That's what I did. And the first lesson I learned, and I later testified, I was after the riots, because I was a white guy, needed a token white guy to speak who had been in the middle of the riots. In front of a hearing in the early 70s, they said, what programs did you see in all those years you were on the streets change people? I said, I didn't see one program change anybody. And I give that same answer today. It's relationships that change people, not programs. That a good program simply has created the environment where healthy relationships are happening between adults and children. And I said, these kids are out of relationship with people, they're out of relationship with resources. I said, there's something wrong here. But that was the most important thing I learned early in it, that it's all about relationships, and I can say that today. And I want to do a sidebar here. About a year ago, I was asked to speak. I mean, really, they call me Forrest Gump reincarnated. For some reason, I was asked to speak to 600 entrepreneurs in the technology world that wanted to do blended learning. They wanted to get inside the schools, and I was in a lot of schools, and so for some reason they asked me to come speak to their dinner. I didn't even know what they were talking about, and they were there to do their deals and get investments from the Gateses and the Pearsons to try to do this stuff. So I was really feeling nervous, like I am tonight, to get up in front of all these people. I didn't even understand what they were talking about. I know how to upload, download, and reload, but I don't know much more about technology. But I got up there, and I said, I was asked a question a few months before I spoke here tonight in an interview, and I was asked a question I'd never been asked in my life. They said, you've given your whole life. I didn't give anything. I was called to it. I feel good about it. I was called to Christ, and I was called to the streets. I've lived a good life. But they said, I want to ask you a question. If you thought of all kids, not just the kids you've had the privilege of working with, what do you think comes to your mind as the biggest thing, the biggest issue out there from your viewpoint? And I said, well, fortunately, I wrote an introduction in this last book I wrote. I wrote a letter to my grandchildren. And in there, I told them one of the things I said I was concerned about is that this generation doesn't know the difference between an information ship and a relationship. I said, that pad does not give you a relationship. Those aren't your friends. Friends happen by breaking bread with people, being in their face, listening to their hurts, living out life, being committed. And I said, that pad's very important because it keeps us connected. But that's not the connected. I said, we're more connected now and less relational than any time I've seen in my journey. So it was this relationship and the fact that that's what changes things. I think the relational model is more prophetic now than any time in my journey. And I hope you do something about it. But I learned that on the streets. The next thing I learned about was about community, because the only community I had that accepted me, we did some bad things. But I was accepted, but I didn't know how to be community. I didn't have it at home. I had the wrong kind on the streets. But one day, Vinny, who had been on heroin and had been staying off heroin the whole time we were ministering together, said, how can we say we love kids and let them live on rooftops here in New York City? You can go out there and tell them about Jesus. You can go out there and care about them. But then you go home. So Trinity Parish downtown, we found out had a couple, this is before the Lower East Side when you could afford to live there. Nobody wanted to live there, but they had 2 empty tenement apartments. So they had one for young ladies, one for young men. So for 5.5 years, I learned about community. And I suffered a lot because I didn't know how to be it. And in the first few years, I spoke at 12 kids' funerals by the time I was 26, and I was so angry, I couldn't have sat in a room like this with you all. because I couldn't understand how I was living, speaking at kids' funerals, and 40 blocks away were the richest people in the world. And I said, where's God? Where's God's people? Why are we the only ones breaking bread with people down here? And I had to learn that we were all separated in our little bubbles. I was beginning to see the separation between the have and have-nots, and that these kids were being left behind, but they had all this potential. So the way I got into education, called to do something there, wasn't because I knew anything about education. Vinny had an 8th grade education, but a lot of prison time. But we loved the kids and we stayed focused on it. And that's how God works. When you take a call, you want to hang up because he said, now you're going right into where you failed. You're going to do something about education. Well, what I learned in living together, and I quit losing young people in our living situation there, when I learned along with caring, you got to have accountability. And that's when I cried and wrote the first book about tough love. I learned along with caring, you got to have accountability. You can't lie, because that breaks down community. And I caught a young man in a lie that I loved so much, but I had to kick him out. He said he was going to kill himself. Unfortunately, he didn't. But that brought some stability. And I learned how to be honest and open and share. And I said, these kids are out of relationship, but we're all out of relationship. I got to take a minute on this because the way my brain works. I was asked some years ago when President Clinton, it was his last year, and one of my board members had this great idea that we get all the living presidents and Mrs. Reagan and have a summit. And I was against summits because they never work. People get up and then come down. I mean, the first one was a disaster. This guy goes up on the mountaintop and gets these 10 things and comes down and smashes them. But they said, well, let's have one of those things and bring all America together, governors, mayors. Some of you are old enough to have been there. But we went, and we got General Powell. He was in between jobs to be the chair of it. And we were flying up to Philadelphia to talk to the mayor. It was Randall at the time. And poor Powell, he didn't know who I was. But he said, why are you in schools? I said, that's because that's where the kids are. And I want to take a few minutes. I hate those things. You're going to have to, I mean, this is our anniversary, and I have, we're getting a free meal, but you ain't getting off the frickin' seats till I'm done. But this is important. I'll give you my little sociology. But what happened was, Powell says, why are you in schools? And I told him, I said, look, when I testified in Washington, I told him in the early 70s, I said, education is going to become the #1 issue in America, and you're going to think it's education. I said, we're going to win or lose the future of America at the schoolhouse door. But it's not going to be solved because of education. We've had a breakdown in community. And schools have fallen into the vacuum that was created by this breakdown in community. And I said, schools are being asked to be mother, father, sister, brother, social worker, hug guard, because they don't have that community anymore. And I traced it back. I devour information, even though I can't do it the regular way. But I said this to these Congress people. I said, you know, right after World War II, and I heard Tim talk about World War II, right after that we started a major shift. It was nobody's fault. This is the structural part of what he was talking about. What happened is the farmers, instead of going to the farms, a lot of them went into the cities, into metropolises. Then you had the GI Bill kick in, you know, all that, and then the economy heats up. A guy wrote Man-Child in the Promised Land, talked about the African-American community migrating from the Alabamas, the Mississippis, and all over, looking for the Promised Land, and they didn't find promise or land because they weren't equipped for the economy they were facing in the North. And they didn't know there was also going to be prejudice there. And then we had a little thing called suburbs. It was whites only, but it kind of happened up here in this part of the country. My theory was that we pulled apart the safety net for children, which was the extended family, in relationship with the faith community were the mediating structures. Barn burns down, people building. It was what Tim was talking about, the ethic. We're our neighbors. Hillary writes a book. It takes a a village to raise a child on the African proverb. I said to her, "Where's the village?" Over all those years, we lost the village, and then we built these institutions around. So we dealt with health in one part of town, and faith in another, and police in another, and we were fragmented. Then we built these institutions around the fragmented pieces. How can you have community? I said, the kids don't see community. You can't give away what you don't have. If they don't see us loving one another and working together, how can we ask the kids to do it? But I felt schools fell into the vacuum that was created there, and that we needed to build community around there by all of us coming together and working and creating small, caring environments. So my journey has taught me that it's about relationships and it's about communities. But if we don't know what happened to us, we can't solve the issue. We have faulty thinking. Because we're meant for each other. We're meant to be connected. And so we've all been put into silos. And the poor were put into silos, public defenders, public welfare, public housing. So the people of God have to understand how to transform those institutions as well as the lives of the individual. I've learned through the schools that every kid needs a personal relationship with a caring adult. I learned that we all are hungry for community and we're unnaturally separated from one another. We put older people out to pasture earlier and earlier, little kids into institutions younger and younger. And then we wonder, and then we try to solve it around the fragmented pieces. You take that which is fragmented and put it together, that's called holiness. Because we're meant to bring not only who we are, but our gifts to the table. I want to say one other thing I learned on this. And this happened at a hearing, and I have to go through this so quick. But I learned this. I learned the kids needed that personal relationship, that safe place. They needed to have a skill. How could I say I love these kids and not get involved in education to give them the remarkable skill for the 21st century, which they aren't getting? I said they also have to have the gift of giving back. And I was being cross-examined some years ago. I had given up going to hearings, but I had, because nobody's listening, that's why they call them hearings. And I didn't want to go, so you go with a bad attitude, you get a bad attitude back. So I go before, and I just want to get it over with, and I'm grouchy, and of course you get a grouchy politician yelling at you. At the end, he said, "Hold on, I want to ask you one other question." I said, "What's that?" "What's the difference in the kids you've seen make it over all these years and the kids who didn't?" And right then I got so much pain. And I said, "This isn't fair. I got 3 minutes to answer a question about the whole life. And all I could see were those kids that I spoke at their funerals." And then through God's grace, I didn't go across that table or I wouldn't have been here tonight. I said, "They made it because we allowed them to make it." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said that I found that the greatest gift you can give somebody is to allow them to give something to you. That help is not always helpful. It can be very paternalistic and hold people in slavery, because if you think you're better than that other person, then you aren't going to change them. It's one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread, as one of the great theologians said. We're all broken. We all need each other. And so we found out if we created these small, caring environments where everybody was expected to give and we could receive their gifts. That's why I fight so hard in Washington to keep the arts in the schools. I said art is one of the ways kids find their identity, where they can do something, where we can say, "Hey, that's wonderful." And they find out, well, listen, if I can do this, I want to learn that. God's given us the arts so that we can do that. It's where the identity comes and where people get, and they feel they're part of the democracy and part of the change. This is what I've learned in the journey. I was sitting here tonight, and for some reason it hit me because one of Gene and I's good friends died too early. And I come to New York a lot, and I'd come up to see him as he was a big guy and a very, very successful guy. And his life was cut short by cancer. And he used to say the best time to visit me is at dinner. So that worked out good with me. I'd do my business, I'd go there. But I watched the 4 times in a row I was there, it was the same shift. And we have a daughter that's a nurse, so I know a little bit about it. And this nurse would come in, and my friend would kind of go into a fetal position. She did all the nursing stuff, check the thing off, the bedpan, pulling the curtains, and all the stuff you do. And she left in it. And then the next nurse would come in during that part, toward the end of my time there, and he would just brighten up. Did all the same things, the bedpan. I wrote to myself on the way back, I said, there's the difference. Both are nurses. Both are committed to being a nurse, and they both get paid for it. But for one, it's a calling. For the other, it's a job. And no matter what you do, whatever your job is, there's a calling in that job. And you're there because God's given you that gift to be in that job. But if it's not a calling, then you need to get out. Because God's kingdom needs us to be there because we know we're in the right place. And we need to be bonded together with others who are part of that. I'll end with this because you rolled double zeros here. I know what I've lost. How should I end? Okay. A couple Christmases ago, I was invited to speak to, you talk about God's great sense of humor. I was asked to talk to all the attorney generals. And I have a friend in Pittsburgh that was a hitman that I grew up with that literally met Jesus when another friend of mine put 3 bullets in him. He finally realized he said, God, keep me alive and I'll serve you the rest of the time. And he has, Gene, and I've supported him. So he had to learn the hard way. But Joe went and he's been working on the streets of Pittsburgh ever since. So Joe calls me and we contribute to him and he says, hey, my fiduciary says you don't have your year-end gift in yet. So I said, hey, Joe, we'll get the check in. He said, you're always flying somewhere. Where are you going now? I said, I'm going to go speak to the attorney generals. He says, you're what? He said, are they all going to arrest you at once? This, by the way, after he met Jesus and I went back to Pittsburgh and met in an old place, I said, Joe, he said, I want to be a minister. I want to work on the streets. I said, hey, how are you going to get out of the mob? He says, I'm out. I said, how'd you get out? He said, I started talking about Jesus Christ, and they said, get the hell out of here. So Joe can't comprehend me going to speak to the attorney generals. But the reason was because I care about not just changing lives, I care about the data that backs it up, because we wanted to prove that caring and accountability in community transformed lives. And so we had a 5-year longitudinal study to prove that it's relationship and community. And we'd also gone through a return on investment that showed in these 2,400 schools and these 1,500,000 kids that weren't supposed to make it each year were making it, and that the return on the investment was $11.60 for every one. So we were back in the relational with the data, so they asked me to speak because that was unusual. They usually don't have nonprofits do that. Anyhow, at the end of my time, it's not a warm, fuzzy group. But it was really important for us because these people were just getting beat up by from sex trafficking to drugs and So I said to him, look, I'll never come back here. You won't invite me because I'm so freaking old now, but you heard it all. But let me end with this. I said, you and I both know this, that hope is not a soft word. Hope's the game changer. You know that if somebody doesn't have hope, they're going to do one of 2 things. They're going to hurt you or they're going to hurt themselves. Vinny, that was my partner in starting this, was putting a needle in his arm. I was part of people that was hurting people. Jesus transformed us because somebody came into our lives that lived it out. I doubted all that stuff, but that guy kept showing up. He believed that I had some skills that nobody else could see. And he said, if you just take your organizational skills that you're doing negatively and use them positively, you have no idea what God's going to do with that calling. It's all about grace, folks. And we need each other. And when you're in relationship with somebody and believe in them, that's God giving them hope. And when we're a community of people bringing our gifts together as one orchestra, then we are giving away love and relationship in community, and that's what transforms lives, and that's what transforms cities. So thank you.